All right, great. We might get going. We've got quite a lot to cover today, so we'll kick off. Thank you so much again for joining us today for Female Voices on the Frontline. We're going to have a 40-minute panel discussion followed by 15 minutes of question and answer. We'd love for you to ask questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, and we'll try to get through as many of those as possible during the session. Over 250 million school-aged children are out of school across the globe, and of those who are in school, 2/3 are failing to learn. Street Child believes that supporting children to stay safe, in school and learning is one of the most effective ways we can address global inequalities. We specialize in supporting children and communities in some of the most complex and challenging contexts across the world. Our work's more important than ever in the context of the COVID-19 crisis, which has left over 1 billion children out of school. The crisis has had an enormous impact on girls and women, and that's what our amazing panel today is here to tell you about. Each one of our panelists has had immense insight into what's happening on the ground with our communities at the moment, and we're really excited and grateful for them to be able to share that with you today from all their corners of the world. And on that note, I'm really delighted to introduce our moderator today, Cathy Newman. And as well as being a renowned and respected journalist and news presenter, she's also the author of Bloody Brilliant Women, which hopefully you've all received a copy of in the mail. We're thrilled to have Cathy with us, and without further ado, I'm going to hand over to her to take you through the session today. Thank you so much, Cathy.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all our panelists and you, the audience, who we can't see, but we trust you're there, so that's great. Really glad to be doing this event, and obviously it'd be even better if we were doing it face-to-face, but clearly that's not possible. Coronavirus obviously has been an incredibly tough thing, and still is, in the midst of this pandemic, incredibly tough for everyone, whether you're having to work from home or having the stress of traveling to work, juggling homeschooling and work, being furloughed, losing your job. All of those things are stressful. But if all of that is undeniably tough, I just try to imagine how much tougher and more challenging life is for women and girls in the developing world, in conflict zones, where access to the kind of healthcare that we take for granted is an impossible dream, and where every day you're, in some instances, fearing for your lives. So that's what this discussion over the next hour is about, to talk about some of the challenges facing women and girls during this pandemic, particularly in Nepal, Afghanistan, and Nigeria. So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome three very dynamic women who do incredible work with Street Child in those three countries. Srijana Tuladhar, who is a program manager for Street Child in Nepal. Palwasha Hassan, a director of the Afghan Women's Educational Centre and a member of the Civil Society Advisory Board to Afghanistan's Ministry of Peace. And Professor Patricia Donli, an educationalist and lecturer at the University of Maiduguri in Nigeria and a member of the UN Women Civil Society Advisory Group. So a really illustrious panel, and thank you all so much for being with us today. I'm just going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves in turn and then spend about 5 minutes setting out what you see as the sort of setting the scene really in the country where you are and where you work, and the work you do in non-COVID times for women and girls, and the challenges now during the pandemic. And I'll then quiz you all and open it up to audience questions for about the last quarter of an hour. So that's the shape of the event. I'd like to hand over now to introduce Srijana.
Sure, Cathy. I'm Srijana Tuladhar, and I'm working as program manager at Street Child of Nepal, and I'm overseeing most of the projects here. So I would like to give you a brief background about Nepal. Nepal is a landlocked country in South Asia and is bordered by China and India. It is located in the Himalayas and contains 8 of the world's 10 highest peaks. Nepal has a traditional economic system in which the majority of the people engages in agriculture. So Nepal also ranks amongst the least developed nations in the world, ranking 147th out of 189 countries in Human Development Index. And Nepal also ranks amongst lowest 30 countries on Gender Inclusion Index. So about 25% women were found to have experienced intimate partner, physical and sexual violence at least once in their lifetime. So I'll also want to give you a brief background about the area that we work in. So we work in the province 2 in Nepal, which is one of the poorest province in the country, and we are working for women empowerment and gender equality in the equality. So nearly half of the population in province 2, around 48%, are categorized as multidimensionally poor people, meaning that they rank lowest in education, health, and living standard. Province 2 has also has most number of people belonging to Dalit caste, so-called the untouchable caste, who have experienced centuries of discrimination. So we did a large-scale learning survey in June last year, which is called Annual Status of Education Report, ASA, the largest scale survey ever done in this province. So it highlighted an education crisis in the region. 10% of the children in grade 4 and grade 5 are unable to recognize a single letter or a single number, and 80% of children who completed grade 5 are unable to read and do math at grade 3 level.
Just unmuting myself. Thank you very much for that introduction, Srijana. So I just wanted to start really with the specifics of the pandemic with you and how that's affected the women and girls that you work with particularly. What's been the most immediate impact of that?
Sorry, was that question to me or to Srijana?
That was to Srijana.
So yeah, could you please repeat the question again, because we lost you for a second.
Don't worry at all. It was just to ask you about the impact of the pandemic on women and girls. You set out the scene generally in the country, but tell us what the impact of the pandemic has been.
Okay, so Nepal was under a strict, very strict lockdown between March and June, which meant that all the Musa household, not only Musa, but also everyone in the nation, nationwide household had to, everybody was confined in their house, and Musa households immediately lost their income because of this strict lockdown. Majority of Musas did not have savings, so quickly they run out of food and savings and money, whatever they had with them. So in soon after the lockdown started, we did a survey of with over 200 Musa communities and settlements that we worked. We found out that 80% of the families were facing hunger and starvation and had not received any cash and food relief support from any kind of agencies or even government. So during our weekly phone check-ins that we do, on weekly basis, we found out that 8.7% of girls' well-being has been affected, and they still feel stressed, depressed, which is also led by the hunger and starvation that they are facing right now. And many of them have also reported to have living on rice and salt once a day, which they are managing by taking loans at higher interest rate. So not only that, Musa girls are also at a high risk of abuse and harm during confinement, as frustrations within families grow due to dire economic conditions, and this manifests in the form of physical partner violence and or child abuse or any forms of violence. So now that the lockdown is more relaxed currently, but the problem is not over yet. We still worry that girls are vulnerable to harmful forms of labor, as they and their families are desperate to earn money and food. So some of the examples could be, trafficking, transactional sex, going back into bonded labor are major threats if girls and their families don't receive support in time.
Srijana, thank you. I'll come back to you and ask some more detailed questions on the pandemic and its impact, and some of the figures and stats that you've got to illustrate the problem. But I just want to introduce our next speaker now, Palwasha from Afghanistan. And if anyone wonders why she's sitting in semi-darkness, I think it's because you're using a solar generator. Is that right?
That's correct. Good afternoon. I don't know what time exactly is right now there.
1:45.
Sorry, quarter to one. Okay, so still noon time. Anyhow, it's later afternoon here in Afghanistan, and I think giving little bit information about my country, most of you probably know already that Afghanistan is one of the countries who has been in conflict from last 40 years. And unfortunately, despite of peace process going on, we have one of the heightened situation of insecurity right now. And with the last few months, it has been very worse, where we had attacks, especially against the civilian, including bombing of the maternity, bombing of the hospitals, bombing the private parties, funeral, and targeted assassination of human rights activists and others. So that is overall like the situation. We are living in a kind of hopes of peace process will end up some of our misery, but it's so unfortunate that ceasefire is not taking place. And the warring parties think that through military win, they probably will secure much power on the table. That is one part of the story, but there is also a bigger part of the story in Afghanistan is that women in this country is still working, and despite of all the difficulties and conditions that we all are, I think we have no other way but to be active and to be hopeful and to pursue what we can achieve for our children. For instance, the Street Children project that initially in Afghanistan, by the way, we are very ill-equipped for facing the pandemic. Our hospitals are not even fully functional. The corruption is so high. Recently, we had a huge scandal coming into the media that even in that limited resources that we have, we still are not having the resources which should reach the people. Afghanistan is one of the countries where 50%, more than 54% of the population is living under poverty line. So that can give you a little bit a picture of where we are right now. But what people are doing, I think COVID teaches a lot of lessons. And one of the important thing which I see as an achievement was dependency that women on in particular had in this pandemic time to depend on each other, to raise funding for those who are in need, especially for categories like street children, like other deprived groups, to raise funding to support families who are surviving on their day-to-day gains on the street, for instance. So we had lockdowns, which was on and off, but overall the daily livelihood of people is so much affected, where already it is not in a good condition. With Street Child, we have a different partnership, and one is to work with women who are in the prison. By the way, women who are in the prison in Afghanistan, they are not all criminal cases. Very few probably criminal cases. The rest is morality crime. Means like those who are seen for running away, elopement from their family, or maybe forced marriage, which doesn't have a legal ground, but these women end up in the prison because of different reasons, including maybe deceived by their partners, abuse on the way, and sometimes they have been multiply abused because of the police and others not being so protective of their situation, and they end up in the prison. So during COVID, the first thing was like our activity was stopped. We were not allowed to go inside the prison here to help these women with the kind of program that we have, which is including from education to helping them developing their skills, psychosocial support, and also preparing them for the life after the prison. So in the COVID time, we were not allowed initially to go inside the prison, but eventually we started working around this by supporting the peer support education, for instance. So there were some brighter trainees among the prison inmates, and we have been working with them to work with their other friends or other women who are inside the prison. And eventually, through our health program, we were able to start some giving them more support inside the prison, especially on the COVID. We helped them to understand how to cope with that situation. Also, our other partnership with the Street Child has been to work and raise the awareness of thousands of people who are forced to, or maybe under special circumstances, are leaving Pakistan and Iran to come back to Afghanistan. So we had thousands of refugees coming from Pakistan back to Afghanistan, and with the Street Child together, we had this work of raising awareness of these returnee community to help them understand how to keep themselves safe, especially women and children. That was the kind of, we developed awareness packages. We give them basic hygiene material, and that is how we try to support their understanding how to cope with the situation, especially coming back, even if they are coming to their own home country, but absorbing capacity has been so low, the support has been so low, that we were trying to fill those gaps, at least at the knowledge level, at the awareness level, where we can. But also we try to raise support through our personal links and contacts, and through Afghan diaspora community, to give them the necessary needs or help that they needed as a food packages and others. So that is overall sort of things that is a bigger picture here.
Palwasha, thank you very much for that very comprehensive overview. And I want to come back to you in particular. You were talking about the prisons there. I want to come back to you and talk in some more detail about that a little bit later. But let's hear from Patricia now in Nigeria, if you could also set the picture and also the challenges of the pandemic in particular.
Thank you very much, Katie. Like Katie said, I'm Patricia, and I come from Nigeria, and I'm the executive director of an NGO that is based in Borno State. I'll be talking specifically about Borno State this morning. We've been working in Borno State since 2008. At that time, Borno State was known as the home of peace. But then 2009 came, and Borno State was no longer the home of peace with the incoming of Boko Haram. Borno State became the home of peace. There were many people. In fact, the situation was so bad in 2013 and 14 that it was said to be one of the worst humanitarian crises that has ever been in recent times. Girls were being abducted, schools were destroyed, hospitals were destroyed, girls were violated, increase in GBV, abducted girls were being like the Chibok girls, over the 200 Chibok girls that were abducted, the over 100 Dapchi girls that were abducted. Some of those Chibok girls have not yet returned. Leah Sharibu is still in captivity. Children were on the streets. There was huge and massive displacement of people moving from the rural areas into the capital, which is Maiduguri, and then the adjacent local government headquarters. So we had a situation in where there were many camps. People were displaced into many camps and many host communities. Children were out of school, livelihoods were scuttled, men were killed, a lot of widows and female-headed and girl-headed households. Prior to this situation of Boko Haram, we have worked in various areas of gender equality, women's rights, including sexual and reproductive health rights, promoting girl-child education, and campaigning against child marriage. But with the coming of Boko Haram and the level of the children that were out of school, we started working in the area of education in emergency, providing education to those children, and we partnered with Street Child in doing that. Apart from that, we also worked in the area of protection, children's protection, providing psychosocial support to those children that have been traumatized, and providing operating child-friendly spaces, and then providing support for very, very poor caregivers of these children. Another thing that we did was work in the area, work with men, traditional leaders, religious institutions, because we know that as long, even if we, no matter how much we empower the women, the culture in the area is such that if we do not get the support of the men, because it's a patriarchal society, it's a very, very conservative society. So we needed to partner with them to support and to promote the participation of women. We also, with the abduction of the Chibok girls, we also worked with the communities, because there was fear after the abduction of Chibok girls that their children were no longer safe in school. And according to parents, they are beginning to think that it is even better for their children to be married early, because they know, they are sure of where their daughters are, they are in their husbands' houses, than not knowing where their children are in the bush. So we had to build their confidence, we had to get the communities involved, and we have to develop a guideline for security and safety of schools in Borno State. When the Dapchi issue also happened, the same project was extended to Dapchi, and we have also developed a guideline for the safety and security of the girls in school. We are hoping that these guidelines will be adopted by the various governments and scaled up to various other schools. One of the areas we're working is in the area of gender-based violence. Gender-based violence is highly prevalent in Nigeria, such that the National Assembly passed a bill in 2015 known as the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act. Unfortunately, Nigeria is a federation and there's no automatic domestication. The National Assembly can domesticate it or can promulgate it, but the states are not under any obligation to domesticate it. So we are working, Borno State is not one of the states that have domesticated it. So we are working with other women-led organizations campaigning for the domestication of the VAP Act in Borno State. Then when the COVID-19 came, we started on the issue of how do we build the leadership of the women to begin to create awareness and lead the process of COVID-19 in their communities. So we started sensitizing and building their capacity in various areas of COVID-19, in the area of the symptoms, in the area of how it is spread and how we can prevent spread, and in the area of advocacy and how to disseminate the various IEC materials that were produced. And in all the communities where we work, we had what we are called the COVID-19 banners that were translated in the various languages of the people so that they are able to read it and be able to also disseminate it. We also, through the help of Street Child, had washing facilities within various all these places where we work, and provided soap and sanitizers for them. And we also had issues of megaphones to be able to make announcements at particular places. And we had focal persons within those communities to be able to create awareness on issues of COVID-19. Together with Street Child, I think we've been able to reach over 50,000 people, made up of about 25 women or women, females, and males, boys and girls. So we've been creating that awareness, and we've also been able to give food support to about 400 women during the crisis, because we found out that the palliative by government was not reaching the women. There were areas that were served and there were areas that were underserved, and some areas were not served at all. So two of the communities that we worked with, we were able to provide food support for 400 women and their families. So basically, I think that is what we are doing. And in partnership, we've been working with Street Child, Plan International, Save the Children International. We've also worked with UNFPA and International Alert. International Alert, we worked in the area of worked in the area of getting communities to accept the women who have been rescued from Boko Haram, because that became a problem, especially if they came back with children. There was a publication by UNICEF of bad blood. The community said they can accept their own daughters, but they will never accept a child that is born out of any association with Boko Haram. So that became a problem. There is no woman, no matter how the child came to be, that will want to be separated from their own child. So we are working with the communities and see whether acceptance of these women can be increased. Thank you,
Patricia, thank you so much. We're getting some great questions in already, so do submit your questions, you, the audience. Very off-putting not being able to see you. One comment on your contribution, Patricia. Someone said you should be president of Nigeria, so I hope that's next on your list.
Hello, what did you say, Katie?
I said one of the questions said, you, having heard your contribution just then, someone said you should be president of Nigeria. So I hope that's next on your list.
That will be a long way off. Nigeria is not yet right for that.
Nigeria is not ready for you. Well, that's a great shame. So thank you, ladies, for those excellent contributions, excellent scene setting. I'm going to ask you each now the same question. So if you're able to listen in, so we don't have technological glitches here. And then I want to ask you each a sort of slightly different question too, in your different, because there's different challenges in each of the countries, but obviously some challenges, there are similar themes across all three. And then I want to bring in the audience for questions, because time is ticking on already. So I wanted to ask you each in turn for the current picture on the pandemic in your country in terms of the infection rate, the death tolls, and the current situation, obviously as it affects particularly people, women and children in particular. But so Srijana, could you put me in the picture in terms of any figures you have of infections and death rates in your country?
So currently in Nepal, we have around 15,000 cases reported positive, and it is so this dramatically. So in the beginning of April, it was only 10 cases that were reported, but by the end of April, it dramatically changed, and since then the cases have been increased. Like per day, there are 500 to 600 cases increasing every day. But in comparison to the death rate of SAARC countries, Nepal has been scores the highest. Scores the lowest, because only till date there's only 31 deaths till date.
Are those figures believable, 31 deaths, and how can you put us in the picture of how the healthcare systems are coping?
So the healthcare, talking about the healthcare system, it is actually the infection rates that is because of the strict lockdown we had at the earlier stage. There were very low, the infections. But the healthcare system, if I have to talk about it, I think it is very weak, and government has also started charging people who have who were infected. Earlier it was everything, the health support, everything was very low, and the government were doing tests for free. But now the government has started to charge for tests and the PCRs and all the tests. So the people in the country are actually demanding to have test 100% test, but government does not have the capacity to do it. So, and also regarding the healthcare system, the quarantines and also the isolation centers, they are not up to the standards that has been by WHO. So this is something that we see in the news daily. So it is very poor at the moment.
Thank you very much, Srijana. Palwasha, how is the situation in Afghanistan with the number of infections and deaths and the healthcare system? How has that put us in the picture?
Thank you, Cathy. You asked very good question from Srijana about how reliable is the data. So in my country, the data is really questionable because the official figure shows up to 30,000 people are infected. This is in the situation that we estimate our population between 30 to 35 million. So that's very small, and also the death toll is shown to be up to 500, which is small as well, because I remember the initial days when we were checking the official data, and I was looking only to some of the villages where I was working. Already in one of the districts, the number of the people dead was higher than what the government was counting for the whole province. So there are some parallel surveys by individuals and groups. So one of the surveys shows like up to 10 million people are infected. So that is probably correct, because even the lockdown is not really consistent, and it is like on and off. People are kind of frustrated. They depends on the food and other things that they like to get. The support that came through government has been very minimal, but some for limited time with bread donation through the bread card was given to the poor family to get free bread from the bakeries. But that also finished with some initial distribution of also wheat. So, you know, like for continuing their own living, people do continue, and you hear, like if you're in Afghan social media, every day you will see your friends are putting pictures of their family member being dead, their father, their older people in particular, and also sick people. So, but the system of complaint is not there, and people, even those who I knew, the women from civil society and others, they will not go for testing because it's expensive, though, two, it's not reliable, and people know, like checking their symptom and taking care of themselves on their own at homes. So in that respect, you cannot really know what is the actual statistics of the,
right.
Yeah.
Right, thank you, Palwasha. I'll come back to you in a minute on prisons, because I do want to delve into that in a little more detail. But Patricia, can you tell us similarly, as we've heard from Srijana and Palwasha, about the situation with the number of infections and deaths, and whether those figures are robust?
Okay. The index case was in February 27th in Nigeria. And since then, about 26,485 cases have been confirmed and 603 deaths. Where I am in Borno State, 493 cases have been confirmed and there are 32 deaths. However, the figures are much, much higher than indicated because there is limited testing facility. People are not going for tests. For example, I think since the index case, about 132 tests so far have been carried out. And out of that is 26,485, which translates to about 19% of the population. So definitely the figures are much higher. And to answer one of the questions that you asked, apart from the weakness, the health facilities. In fact, COVID-19 has exposed our health system, its weaknesses, very, very weak. And COVID-19, at least one thing it has done is that it has equalized everybody. The rich people can no longer fly out. So we are all using the same facilities. And now everybody is shouting, whether in government or outside government, we need to strengthen our health system. We need
Patricia,
to...
I just wanted to just interject there, and that is an amazing, you know, the silver lining to the cloud of COVID, that perhaps it's focused the attention of government on the inadequacies of the health system.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And people are now shouting because the Abuja Declaration on Health is that 15% of the annual budget must be utilized in the health system. And what has been coming for this last year, it was just 4.6%. And people are beginning to ask questions. We need to up our allocation to the health system. So maybe the silver lining is that we are going out of this, we are going to have a stronger health system, and there will be no need for us to go on a medical tourism. Instead, people shall do medical tourism to Nigeria. That is what we are hoping for.
Patricia, thank you. I'll come back to you in a minute on a bit more detail on the gender-based violence and why that's increased during the pandemic. Srijana, I wanted to ask you about the Musaha community. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Please correct me if I'm not. And the fact that, as I understand it, that Musaha means literally rat eaters, and why during this pandemic that community is particularly badly affected.
So, as I mentioned that you mentioned correctly that Musahars are literally the rat eaters, because traditionally they were the rat catchers, and most of them till today survive eating rats and continue this occupation due to poverty. And so this was, and most of them are, 99% of the Musahars are landless, and they are, 100% of them are bonded laborers. So this is the pre-existing scenario in this community, and after the after the pandemic, I think this is these communities like Musahars are have been impacted the most. So as I already said that most of them, they've lost their income, and they are facing the starvation and hunger currently. And one of the major risks that they are facing are the protection risks. So there has been around 3 to 4 deaths till date because of starvation, and also there has been a couple of suicides because of the situation. So the community is suffering a lot at the moment. And we're also, like, as I also already said, that this community currently is now in a desperate situation to earn, because there is a pre-existing condition that they were already they already had loans at almost 40% interest, and because of this scenario, the loan is increasing, and they are desperate to earn their living. So we are afraid that they would jump into rash decisions, like accepting transactional sex and also going back to bonded labor. So this is one of the scenario right now. And we've also been reported that all of them, like when our social workers, they call them every week, and we have girls who cry every day and say that we don't have food, and we are only having 1 meal per day, and we're only surviving on salt and rice, and is there any way that we could support them? So currently now we are focusing on providing them food support. So till date we've supported 1,000 households. We will be supporting 1,000 households, but I think currently we are engaged with over 13,000 households, and it is not enough at all. So yeah, so this is the situation at the moment.
Srijana, thank you very much. Palwasha, I wanted to ask you about the prisons, which you touched on, and just to go into a bit more detail about why women are incarcerated in the first place, very different reasons to why people are jailed here in the UK, and also the challenges with the prisoners being released because of the pandemic. What particular challenges have there been there? Oh, you need to unmute. Great, thanks.
Okay, I often forget that. So as I said before, most of the women who are ending up in prison, it's not really because of the crimes. It's more what's associated with some moral value, which is kind of traditions that is governing our lifestyle here in Afghanistan. And that includes like maybe women who are running away from home, maybe from abusive marriages or like forced marriages, sometimes younger women who want to have their marriage of choice and others. So most of the women that I've been come across are very younger group. And they end up in prison because of committed adultery, which is adultery is defined any sexual relation outside marriage in Afghanistan. So even with their boyfriend or maybe sometime being raped and all that, they somehow are punished for that as a crime, and they end up in prison. So what happened in the current pandemic, that some of the women, there was a general amnesty for exception of some terrorist associated crimes, that prisoners were released, and women were also released on that basis. That has been really alarming, because this has just happened overnight, and this happened in a time when we were not even allowed to interact with the government or either with the women themselves in the prison, because we were stopped from entering or interacting in that particular time. So women, we have few cases which happened like in a worst ending for these women. And there is a particular case of a woman from Badakhshan province who went and has been killed by the family, because in our society you cannot just be released from the prison and you go to a receptive environment, go back to your home. It needs really a lot of work and time to be spent with the family, with the community, and that you make that situation prepare for the woman to go back. And this time, what happened in pandemic, because of nobody was prepared for it, but also for government like taking a very quick decision, and I don't think that was something very wise and actually abusive to the women's situation. So we don't know how many other women end up in even the similar situation, because suddenly the women are released and their contacts are not there and all that. So sometimes we have been advocating that there should be a transition in places in such situation. We still have women who are in prison, but some of them are associated with criminal issues right now, and some of them are still being in prison because of the similar nature of the crimes, which are sometimes seen as a different thing.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you, Palwasha. And I just want to pick up there, obviously, talking about, the women risking their lives by going home to their families. I want to pick up on that point with Patricia, because, obviously there's different situation in each country we're talking about, but there are some common themes. And gender-based violence, Patricia, in Nigeria, you've been talking about the Chibok girls. Why, just go into a bit more detail about what challenges the pandemic has posed in terms of women and girls' safety. Is Patricia still with us? Yes, Patricia. Yes, great. She was preparing her presidential bid.
Yeah, thank you so very much. The GBV is regarded as a shadow pandemic. Sometimes they call it a silent pandemic, but it is no longer silent in Nigeria. It is so loud in Nigeria.
And GBV, obviously gender-based violence. I'm sure everyone.
Gender-based violence, yeah, gender-based violence. It has escalated. It has exploded. The IG of police, that's the Inspector General of Police, reported that between January and May, 717 cases of rape have been reported. And this is highly underreported. So many people, girls have been raped and killed. And the whole thing is increasing because during the pandemic and the lockdown by the government, we found that people are now staying at home 24 hours a day. There is a lot of frustration. The close down of the school meant that children were also at home 24 hours a day. There was skyrocketing problem of food, so the money that they have cannot purchase enough food. Their livelihoods had also been scuttled, so there was no means of generating income. So all these ones combine to create hunger within the home and tension within the home. So you find out that there is violence against the children, there is violence against the women. Gender-based violence is about imbalance in power. So of course, intimate partner violence had also increased. Then we also have problems within the home or within the communities, because the restriction is within the, it's a lockdown, but within the communities, people can still move around within the same community. So we find out that girls were being raped, they were being tortured. Unfortunately, because of the lockdown, people could not go to the hospitals. The hospitals were now more of an isolation center, and where problems of maternal mortality or rapes were there, they could not go. Even if the hospitals were open, the means of transportation to those hospitals were not there, because the taxis and the keke napep and all those tuk-tuk were also bad. We also found out that you can't go to the police because it's all locked up. So the forensic evidence that is even needed to prosecute the rape case was not there, because there's nobody who can sit down and wait until you can go to the police before you wash yourself or you bathe yourself, and so on and so forth. So there was a huge problem. Then we also found out that we put the women-friendly centers where people who were raped or had problems could go for services were also not running, because everywhere was closed. So where they could even go to share experiences, where we can make references, they were all closed down. So you find out that there was a lot of impunity. People could do things and get away with. And then, of course, another thing that was driving the gender-based violence within those communities was that a lot of the men had coping mechanism of drugs. So they were taking a lot of drugs, and of course, this was also fueling the gender-based violence. There is a huge call right now in Nigeria for the federal government to declare a state of emergency in gender-based violence. A student was reading in the church. She was gang raped and killed. Oh. Another postgraduate student in Ibadan was raped and killed. A three-month-old girl was raped and abandoned. 85, so it doesn't matter what age, the whole thing, parents were raping their children, brothers were raping their sisters. So the whole thing was no longer a silent pandemic. And people are beginning to talk. That the government, in fact, our president said something about it, that there is a need for the police and for the Nigerian government to ensure that this rape comes to an end. And women-led organizations everywhere within the country are up in arms, campaigning, lobbying, advocating, and pressurizing to ensure that the governors walk their talk, the president walks his talk, and all the people who are concerned with the National Assembly walk their talk where this is concerned.
Patricia, it's so great to hear that in amongst all the despair, and you had some awful, desperate examples of violence against women there, that in amongst that despair there is hope that maybe things might change for the future. So I think that's a really good moment to open out to questions. So do get your questions in on the little Q&A tab. I'll read them out. I probably won't read who they're from because partly because it's really faint on my screen. So I'll just read the question. So are you, right, so this is a good one to pick up on from what we've just been hearing from Patricia there. Are you witnessing any other silver linings as a result of the pandemic? I'll put that one to Srijana first. Srijana, the question, are there any other reasons for optimism out of this pandemic as Patricia just touched on?
So the silver lining in this pandemic situation is that the government, I would say the distance learning approaches that we have been adopting at the moment. So we have been very our team over here has been very creative enough to bring out creative ways of creative way of doing the distance learning approaches, so which keeps the girls safe at the moment. And also we are also able to maintain the learning level of the girls. And also we do have a very good safeguarding reporting mechanism at the moment. I think I would say that it has been one of the best practices of our projects, and what we've done yet, that the girls can actually, directly go to the access to the services of the government. So earlier, before the COVID-19 scenario, the girls would heavily rely upon the project staff, who were actually teaching them how to report gender-based violences and safeguarding concerns. Now, after this, right before the lockdown started, we had sessions where we had, linked the girls with the government mechanisms who would support them during support them during the lockdown phase. So I think this is increased the autonomy of the girls. And we also have a case, I think just this last week, one of the girl who is actually engaged with us was capable of reporting child marriage, which was going to happen, a forced child marriage, which was going to happen in her community. And using the service directories and service providers information, she was able to actually report this case to the police, and ultimately the child marriage was it was stopped. So I think this is a positive side of this scenario, that though they have become more autonomous, and the existing mechanisms in the community and the country has become more active and capable of addressing the issues of the community.
Palwasha, have you got any silver linings in Afghanistan from the pandemic? Can you offer us any hope?
I will agree with the two other respondents on the issue of creativity. I think we learn a lot how to work maybe foreign distance area online, like today's call. We had to travel a long way that way, but also in our own community to work on different means, or maybe reaching out to a president, for instance, when we were stopped from working there, that peer support that we have created. I think those means the difficulty are teaching you a lot that you can use. And I think we wouldn't have had this experience if we were not under this sort of experience.
And Srijana, just quick question to you. What percentage of the population are Musahar?
So I do not have the percentage, but I do have the population number of Musahars. So across the country, there is 300,000 people residing in Nepal. Musahar people are residing in Nepal at the moment.
Great, thank you. And a question here, if Street Child is listening in, which I assume they are, can you please share how we can get involved with charity work at Street Child? So if that could be shared with participants after the meeting, that would be great. Question here, I teach education policy at the Department of International Development at the University of East Anglia. Are there concerns about girls who have had to stay away from school that they may not re-enter, that they may be forced to drop out permanently? And are there any support programs for getting girls back into school rather than enrolling them for the first time? So let's put that to Patricia first, please. Patricia,
yeah.
Did you get the question? Did you hear it? Sorry, it's a bit limited, isn't it, the technology? Just about whether there's concerns that girls are going to drop out of school permanently because of the pandemic.
Yeah, that is one of the concerns about the pandemic and the closure of schools. Because already a lot of parents are thinking of how they can marry their children out because they are out of school. We expect that a lot of the girls will drop out of school for the reason that their parents will marry them off, or the second reason that there is teenage pregnancy and all those ones. So what we are doing right now in terms of help is that we have case management and we have people who are working within the communities. We also have advocacies. We are going out on advocacies, talking to communities, especially where we work. And I'm talking about the locations where we work. You know, we go out to talk to the communities, the religious leaders, the traditional leaders, and the opinion leaders and women leaders about the importance of education and the importance especially of girl-child education. And we go with people who have already, girls from their area who have already completed their educations. We take them as role models to go to those communities, you know, to let them know that this is what your own child can be if you give the child an opportunity to go to school. Yes, the question is a problem. We have a big challenge there. We have a lot of work to do there.
And Srijana, a quick answer from you on the same question. We're almost at the end of time here, so if we could just keep the answers brief to these questions, that would be great. Srijana, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you.
Yes,
could you
great.
please repeat the question, please?
Just about whether girls will drop out of school permanently because of the pandemic if they stop going.
Yes, we do fear that because especially with the girls that we're working with right now, almost 100% of the girls drop out of the school at the age of 15 because they're married off at a very early age, as Patricia has just mentioned. So it's the same with the Musaha girls as well. So the program that we are running right now, we are supporting them with the accelerated learning program, and I think even in the accelerated learning program in the communities, it was really difficult for us to maintain the attendance and their regularity. So it was you know, we were on the verge of transitioning these girls to the schools, and we do fear that these girls because during this time there are a lot of girls who have already been married because of the married at an early age because of the situation. So there are already girls who were about to transition to mainstream schools have been deprived of this deprived of going to the school. So overall, not only the Musaha but also the Musaha communities, but also other marginalized communities in the country, it is really difficult for us to. It is actually going to be a challenging situation for the education department to have these girls back to school again. So there is a high chance of dropout.
Street Child, I think you wanted to come in live on this point. So is Ramya there? Perhaps not. Yes, you are. Hi.
Yeah, I mean, as Patricia and Srijana have just so beautifully put, this is a major risk for us and one that we're particularly concerned about. We are currently operating a number of different education programs to try and keep these girls engaged in learning, even when they're not able to go to school. One of our flagship programs is called Last Mile Learning, and it's really designed for the types of contexts that Palwasha, Patricia talking about, where girls don't have access to radio or television, let alone internet or mobile internet to be able to continue learning. And so we're putting together packages that they can pursue on their own, independently, self-sufficiently. We record instruction onto little MP3 devices that are solar powered, drop them off in communities, with the teachers going around between communities to make sure that girls are able to learn. And it's really designed to provide that kind of safety and stability, that routine, so that girls can stay feeling that sense of normalcy, which will then encourage them to reintegrate. And of course, at the point of integration, as Srijana touched on, we have a range of options: remediation, catch-up classes, accelerated learning, depending on the amount of learning loss in each context, to be able to then support them to transition into non-formal or ideally into formal learning. So it is a massive focus for us. And I noticed there's some real experts on the call with us today, and would be very grateful for any advice or support from anyone who'd like to reach out.
Well, Ramya, thank you very much for that. And I think we're out of time, but absolutely great to hear from all of you from your far-flung corners of the world. It's just brilliant to have you all on this call and to hear what the particular challenges are. And thank you both, all three of you, and Ramya, for giving up your time today. I'm going to hand over to you now, Ramya, to close this excellent session off. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cathy. And yeah, just to echo a massive thank you to our panelists. And from Street Child's perspective, I think we're particularly thrilled that we've been able to get our partners and our team members from Kathmandu to Kabul to Maiduguri in northeast Nigeria with the technology working, and really just thrilled that we could have everyone together talking about this really important issue today. And of course, massive thank you to Cathy for her expert moderation. And huge thank you to all of you who've taken the time out to attend amidst, I'm sure, thousands of Zoom calls. We really, really appreciate you being here. And you know, Cathy ended by asking our panelists to talk about their silver lining. And I think from Street Child's perspective, one of the real silver linings has been the way that our supporter community has really rallied around to really dial up support at this time, and really kind of come to the table to be able to support us to keep our work going. And of course, we continue to be really grateful for any donations or support that you're able to offer. And as you'll see in the brochures that you've received, £100 enables 60 women and girls in Nigeria to prevent the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic in incredibly challenging circumstances by providing masks or hygiene kits. £1,000 can prevent the starvation of 100 Musaha families in Nepal. And of course, all of these things go a long way to keeping children and communities safe and protected in such a challenging time with crisis after crisis impending. So thank you so much. Anything that you could give at all would be hugely appreciated, and please do reach out to your contact at Street Child if you'd like to talk about how you can support, or visit our website at www.street-child.co.uk. Huge thank you again to our panelists for joining, to Cathy, and to all of you for attending. Please stay safe. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Katie.
Bye.
Srijana, Palwasha. Bye.